Welcome back to Caoch Bills Sports Show. As always, I'm Coach Bill. Thank you for joining us today. We're doing a little Week 6 wrap-up. What we learned, what it kind of showed us, maybe a little peek ahead to some of the episodes later on this week. But first things first, I've said it before, I'll say it again, I'm a Tennessee fan. So we're going to start with Tennessee. Tennessee is a team that people need to understand and be afraid of what they are. Offensively, without a star wide receiver and without their starting left tackle to still hang 40 points on a ranked team. Yes, LSU was ranked 25. But still, they were a ranked team, and we hung 25 points on them at their house. Not to mention, our defense showed up, which hasn't happened all year, except for little spots here and there. So you've got a team that came into the weekend, if not leading the nation, they're in the top 5 for scoring and yards. And then the defense and the special teams showed up. When we play like that, there's not many teams in this league, let alone in the nation, that can hang with Tennessee. I don't know which ESPN personality or commentator said it, but I remember hearing it this weekend that if you were a recruit in high school ball right now on the offensive side of the ball and you aren't looking at Tennessee, why? Why not? Offensively, it looks like a hell of a lot of fun to play in that system. Quarterbacks, wide receivers, running backs, offensive linemen. Just looks like a lot of fun to be a Tennessee Vol right now. Now, coming up, yes, it's the biggest game in Knoxville probably in my lifetime. I was born in 1987. Last time these two teams played undefeated was 1989. So I definitely couldn't remember that game. So, it's been a minute since there's been this big of a game in Knoxville. And number 3 Alabama versus number 6 Tennessee. You should know just how big it is because SEC Nation's going to be there. College Football Game Day is going to be there. They're calling for an orange out, which is a big deal at Tennessee. There's just a lot happening. And it's wonderful to see for Knoxville and the University of Tennessee. Elsewhere in the SEC, Georgia showed up this weekend, which was really nice to see from Georgia. They'd had a few weekends in a row where I don't want to say they didn't show up, but it took them a while to get traction. They didn't look as dominant. Alabama showed they had a little bit of weakness. Now, you have to take Bryce Young out of the equation, and they can still beat you, but they're vulnerable without Bryce Young. With Bryce Young, it's a whole different story. That team is electric. He won a Heisman last year for a reason. He's a solid player. He's going to be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft. The boy just can do anything he wants to do offensively. He's a gamer. He does an amazing job at the quarterback position. It was good to see how the Alabama backup quarterback responded to Texas A&M essentially selling out to beat the run. And with Tennessee's offense, if they have to turn to the backup quarterback next week, it was good for them to see what he could and couldn't do against A&M before he had to keep pace with the Tennessee. I still wouldn't pick against Alabama. As a Tennessee fan, I'm still not going to pick against Alabama, even in Knoxville, because Alabama has the most feared front seven in college football right now, in my opinion. And Mr. Anderson, I am not saying his first name because that man is a beast. And I don't want to see him out in the street. He's a monster. He has become better than he was last year, which is scary to think. If I was a defensive coordinator in the NFL, I would be dreaming of the chance to have that man on my team. He's going to keep a lot of offensive coordinators awake in the NFL. And he's going to make one defensive coordinator very, very happy to have him. Elsewhere, Kentucky lost to South Carolina. And I'll be honest, I didn't start watching this game at the beginning. I definitely thought it would be a one-sided affair. I definitely thought that, Kentucky was going to be at home taking care of business against South Carolina, and that didn't happen. Kentucky looks very, very average as a football team without Will Levis. It just shows how valuable he is. Shows that he's been kind of single-handedly making up for a lot of their deficiencies. Which is both good and bad. But we'll get to the winners. South Carolina, they survived a rough start in this game. Found a groove in the third quarter, and Radler started looking a little bit like his younger self from Oklahoma days. It's a solid win for that team that has some serious meat left on the bones for their schedule. They still have a chance of making a bowl game because they still play Missouri and Vanderbilt, and a 4-win team with those two on it can definitely get to a 6-win team. But they also have Texas A&M, Florida, Tennessee, and Clemson left on their schedule. Now, say what you will about Texas A&M. What Texas A&M team shows up, that's a completely questionable story. Florida has started to find a little bit of a groove now that Richardson's starting to get healthy. And Tennessee and Clemson are current top 10 teams. So there's no... That's a very heavy back-ended schedule for South Carolina. I don't think making it to Atlanta for South Carolina is in the cards, but I think they could definitely be bowl eligible at the end of this year, which, 2 years in a row for the Gamecocks to be bowl eligible is big for them as a program and as a head coach that just started with them. That's huge for that program. Elsewhere this weekend, Michigan took some time to find their offense this wonderful day this weekend and to get themselves in gear. But once they did, they looked like a decently top team, a top 15 team. And it was against a solid Indiana team. Harbaugh has to address the slower starts, especially with Penn State and Ohio State still on the schedule. And Penn State is next week. They got 2 weeks to prepare for this game in the Big House, whereas Michigan gets this week. So expect Penn State to come out fast and heavy. But Michigan's looking solid. It's looking like they're setting up a end of the season contest between Michigan and Ohio State that essentially becomes a play-in game for the college football playoffs. Speaking of Ohio State, they dominated Michigan State again, second year in a row. And they did it without some of their top-tier talent. They still don't have their number one wideout in Smith and Jobu. In Jabba. I'm sorry, I'm just going to butcher that boy's name. But he is a stud. He's a stud out there. I know it doesn't look like they're missing him right now because Marvin Harrison Jr. has been balling out at wide receiver. But you can't help but miss that kind of talent. The kid is a absolute star. So you can't really say, oh, well, when it comes to that kind of talent. Speaking of talent, they're also missing Mayan Williams at running back, which that kid's talented too. There's not a lot of kids at the Ohio State skill positions that are talented, but those two will definitely increase Ohio State's productivity, as the year goes on and they get healthy and come back. Now to the more fun leagues. ACC, nothing against the ACC, the SEC, or the Big Ten right now. They're kind of top heavy. We all pretty much know as long as Clemson plays the way they're playing, they're going to come out of the ACC. We all know that Ohio State or Michigan's coming out of the Big Ten. We all know that it's essentially Alabama, Georgia, and Tennessee in the SEC right now. And I don't want to forget Ole Miss. Ole Miss still has a heavy stretch ahead of them, but there are 4 undefeated teams in the SEC right now. So it's anybody's game. But it's nowhere near as fun or as interesting as the Big 12 and the Pac-12 are right now. While the Big 12 may miss the playoff picture, depending on how this works out for them, their championship race is huge right now. Currently have 5 teams: TCU, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, and Texas, with a path to becoming the Big 12 champions. Yes, that's the same Texas that lost to Alabama. We'll talk about them here in a second. I want to get through some of these other teams first. Texas Tech. Let's start with Texas Tech before we get into some of these. They have a absolutely bright future ahead of them. That program has found themselves an absolute warrior as the young quarterback Morton, just battling through some injuries this past weekend. I wanted to make sure I started off with him when I got into the Big 12, simply because a young man deserves all the praise he can get. To be battling the way he did, to keep them in that game. It was a phenomenal effort by him, and just wanted to make sure I spotlighted that. Their opponents, Oklahoma State, they have some holes. And they were bigger holes than I had seen this year. Texas Tech was able to show a lot of deficiencies in Oklahoma State. One of them in particular is their time management. They need to work on their late game situations. With the lead and the ball, snapping the ball with 16 seconds left on the clock is absolutely asinine. You want to kill that clock. Especially in as tight of a game as they were in. You want to burn that clock. Don't give them time with the ball to come back. That's one of those things that I don't put on the players as much as the coaching staff. Mike Gundy is a absolute amazing coach, but he needs to work on his clock management, especially late game clock management. Sanders, number 3, in a key moment for this game, decided to simply want it more than anybody else on the field and put that team on his back. And Oklahoma State owes Sanders a lot of credit for their win this weekend. Talking about somebody that just wanted it more, the number 1 recruit at quarterback, Quinn Ewers from last year, went to Texas. And he went there for this kind of game. Texas versus Oklahoma, the Red River rivalry. It's just one of those games. And he came in and balled out. He absolutely balled out. So we're going to talk about Texas first because, hey, they won. They deserve it. I think this is a different team And the algorithm shows this is a different team when they have Quinn Ewers. They honestly could have beaten Alabama with Quinn Ewers. I needed to readdress it now that I've seen him healthy and see what he can do. I think Texas may be ready for this. Now on the other side, Oklahoma. I think this is the rock bottom Oklahoma needed. I see a lot of people out there, Brett Venables was a bad hire. Brett Venables was a bad hire. These aren't Brett Venables players, guys. It's not his guys. It's not his. He's trying to put a system in place without his guys. So he's going to need time to make that happen. Offensively, Brett's a defensive coach, so he needs to bring in some guys that'll help him out offensively. And I'm sure he's a smart enough man; he'll figure that out. Defensively, though, allowing 49 points that's tough for a defensive coordinator to live through. But again, it's not his guys. He isn't running his full system yet. But this is probably the rock bottom Oklahoma needed, so he can see who really cares, who wants to be there, and who's just playing for themselves right now. He'll be able to rebuild it, some through the transfer portal, some through recruiting. I would, if I was Brett Venables, lean more on the transfer portal, simply because Oklahoma has become accustomed to winning and winning big. And with the SEC looming ahead, you want to get back into that pattern before joining the SEC. There's a lot that can happen and can go wrong in the SEC. So coming in with momentum is always going to be helpful. Another team that I did not see coming, but they lived on some momentum, is UCLA. I personally had to go back and rewatch and reevaluate their performances this year from what I saw against Utah. I was absolutely surprised how dominant they were against Utah. What this does do is set up a huge matchup. November 19th, thank you for the birthday present. UCLA. The matchup on November 19th is against USC, and it's essentially, it's either a preview for the Pac-12 championship game, because they've gone to a best two teams available style, or it decides who represents based out of the LA teams. Either way, it is going to be one hell of a game. And I'm here for it. Utah on the other side, they turn around and they get USC this week. And back-to-back games against UCLA and USC is not going to be fun for Utah. They don't have a lot of time to figure out the problems. They were that UCLA was able to just take advantage of left and right. It's a bad turnaround, but it's definitely one of the games we're going to be watching this weekend. We'll look ahead at those later on in the week. We'll release the power rankings probably Wednesday. But just as a little tease, Utah and USC are at 14 and 15 in my power rankings. So this is a huge game for both teams. Absolutely huge. This week ahead has some killer matchups. Happy I don't film on Saturdays or work on Saturdays, because I'm going to be glued to watching these games. Thank you for watching. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. We're moving to a Monday, Wednesday, Friday releasing. Seeing if it helps us be a little bit more consistent to get y'all information and stuff that you would like to see. If you have any thoughts, ideas, what you'd like to see from us here, Please drop those in the comment. Let us know. As always, have a wonderful rest of your day. Ready, break.